Hey guys, welcome back to our series where we take the abilities, talents, covenant abilities, resources, cooldowns, cast times, passives, buffs, and debuffs of a class and simulate them 100 million times. We will be attempting to generate the most efficient single target burst sequence we can. Aside from excluding AoE abilities, abilities that proc randomly, and utilities, the simulation has free reign. There are no weights, suggestions, or templates supplied beforehand. Ultimately, this video will be nothing more than a neat experiment. These openers may work in some scenarios, but the best way to get better at PvP is to get familiar with your class. We are very aware just how ridiculous it is to let a program tell us how to play. With the release of Shadowlands, we will now be including the Covenant class abilities when simulating. However, because many of the Covenant abilities are situational, we will also be presenting the rotation generated when excluding the ability. We were excited to return to the Beast Mastery Hunter after various improvements were made to the simulations, mostly the buff and debuff systems from the pre-patch Rogue and Death Knight videos. For the Covenant ability, the Necrolord's Death Chakram was the only option that wasn't AoE or relied on procs. The ability is quite powerful if the target is alone, as the damage adds up quickly, especially for costing no resources. The generated rotations were interesting to say the least. The simulator initially had a preference for Killer Cobra in the final talent row, but this time it was bouncing between Bloodshed and Aspect of the Beast, with it ultimately settling on the latter. As you may have noticed in our intro, we've updated the visual feedback of the simulator greatly. We're now able to quickly see abilities and talents being shuffled, along with a new ability to see the damage curve. The damage curve shows us where in the sequence most of the damage is taking place. For bursting, you'd ideally want a curve that ramps up quickly. However, even some of the most damaging sequences present a more gradual curve like this. A curve like this exposes a conflict of interest in the simulator. We are asking for the sequence that does the most damage, but that doesn't necessarily mean we'll get a sequence that keeps the damage heavy for the majority of the time. In this particular result, we have a curve that slowly builds up in intensity. This is where the conflict comes in, as we don't want to spend most of our burst with light damage that may lead us to getting CC'd or killed before we begin to hit harder. In this other result, the curve is a bit better. The common issue between these two curves is that there is too much time spent escalating damage. In this final curve, things are much better. All three of these curves have very similar damage outputs, but this rotation in particular is dealing damage more heavily than the other two, with damage peaking earlier in the rotation. Because of this, we made some changes to take the damage curve into account. Back in PvP, the effects of this change were surprisingly immediate, with the simulator now striving for a new goal of a more rapid damage escalation. We were seeing ability sequences that pressured the target much more. What you're seeing in these clips is the generated opener crammed into a cast sequence macro. Our damage is coming from one keybind, while utilities or procs like Killshot are being used manually. Now, we'll go over the talents and rotations that were being chosen. Here are the talents, with the 3rd and 5th rows being up to personal choice. The program had no preference for a PvP talent. Here's the opener, along with a version that excludes the Covenant ability below it. We've also shown the damage curve of this opener. If you're enjoying these videos, let us know, and please follow us on Twitter if you're able. In the event of a hotfix, it would be much easier to share how these sequences change in a tweet, rather than making a new video.